Today, every day, small cap investors visit Agoracom knowing this is the day to discover the world's next great company, to have their dreams come true. That's why I take to the open road, to find them, to tell their stories, to engage them, to bring them to life, because they want to connect with you from your office, your phone, your home, anywhere. Agoracom, find your dream.
Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Agoracom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap companies about what's going on with their companies. With us today, happy to have him back, Kelvin Burton, Head of Investor Communications at American Creek Resources, trades on the TSX Venture under the stock symbol AMK. For those of you who are new to the story, and that isn't going to be a lot of you because a bit of a market darling last year and off to a great start this year, but American Creek has essentially an impressive portfolio of high potential gold properties in BC's prolific Golden Triangle, one of the richest areas of mineralization in the world. But more than just lip service, two things you need to know. Their flagship Treaty Creek project is joint venture with Tudor Gold, whose CEO, Walter Storm, funded Osisko Gold before it became a world-class gold mine. And Eric Sprott has invested not once, but twice via private placement in American Creek Resources, and has actually just invested $9.3 million into Tudor Gold itself. So sometimes you don't have to do all the deep dive due diligence. You follow the money. Let's talk about that. Kelvin, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, great to talk with you again, George.
Great to be talking to you. American Creek Resources stock doing great things. A lot of volume. It means that people are watching the story. This is our first interview of the year. So we're going to try and keep this 30,000 foot with some nice detail and then really dive in because we're expecting a lot to happen. The 2020 drill program, congratulations that's underway. What can you kind of tell us about the program, where it is now, what we're expecting in terms of timelines?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on. It's a very exciting time of year. The program on Treaty Creek is going extraordinarily well. We actually were able to get started much earlier than usual.
Right.
Ken Conkin, who runs the program for Tudor Gold, he actually went up with tracked vehicles and was able to go over the ice field from the backside and down the glacier, and was able to get the program started here as early as May 11th. And so they've been drilling for a little while now, and the drilling is going extremely good. They're getting really good return in terms of the amount of meters they get per day. And they're very excited about what they're seeing come out of the holes as well. They've actually sent some of the holes in for assay. Yeah, and so I'm not sure when we're getting those back. I would hope by the end of June or something like that, but it's not my timeline. It's up to the assay labs. But there are ones in for assay already. They've drilled a number of holes. They've had 2 drills going since the 11th of May, and I expect that they will probably have 2 more going any day now.
How much of that is due to the Eric Sprott $9 million investment?
Okay.
What do you read into that? I mean, he's taken a big position in Tudor, which de facto is almost like taking a big position in American Creek just by association, 19.9% of Tudor. What did you make of that when you saw that additional $9.3 million private placement?
Sure, and I think for those who are just new to American Creek, the relationship is this: that Tudor Gold is the developer of the project. They have 60% of the project. They have 3/5 of the project. American Creek has 1/5, and another company called Teuton has 1/5 as well. And our share in it is fully carried, meaning that we actually don't spend any money on the project, but that's what Tudor does, and that stays that way until we have a notice of production.
Which says a lot about Treaty Creek to begin with, right?
Oh,
absolutely. The quality of it.
Yeah, and so when we look at Eric Sprott, he's invested in all 3 companies, and as far as this year goes, he's actually invested them a couple of times already this year, and so. What it's showing is that he sees the potential of this, and he wants to see them accomplish as much as they possibly can. They initially announced a 20,000 meter program based when they had raised about $5.5 million, and then Sprott put in another 3. And my guess is that should probably close to double the amount of meters that they're doing. And then he just put in another 9 this morning. He did it through flow-through shares as well, which means that all of that money is going directly into the ground, through drilling and geophysics and geologists and so forth. And so he sees the potential for them to accomplish something very incredible this year.
Well, Sprott hasn't been shy, at least last year when he's made his first investments into both Tudor Gold and American Creek. He wasn't shy about making some statements about what he believes. So kind of recap us on what he was believing last year, and has that position changed most recently?
It has. And I think that's true for everyone involved, including Ken Conkin to begin with. He knew it was going to be big, but it just seems to keep getting bigger. So before there was any drilling last year, when Sprott first got involved last spring, he said, we've got a good chance for quite a few million ounces here. And then once he saw the drilling take place, then he said, I think they have a great shot at 20 million ounces. And then
It's a huge number, right?
Well, it really is. It's absolutely world scale is what that is. And then he just had an interview with Conkin again recently. And now he's saying, what we're really hoping for here is tens of millions of ounces. And so, and it lines
and that's
up
come
with
from Eric Sprott. We're allowed to repeat it because he's saying it.
That's true.
It's out there. So we might as well let everybody know what he's saying.
It reflects back to what Conkin is seeing in the first place. And that is that right now the gold storm, which is the area that we're working on, he thinks there's a number of gold storms on there. He's calling this one Gold Storm 1, and then he thinks there's a Gold Storm 2 and a Gold Storm 3 on either side, which is part of the geology of the whole system. So we're right beside Seabridge Gold, and we're right beside Pretium, where Ken Conkin had put that mine into production a few years back. And there's a big string of pearls, is what he likes to call them. And there's a sequence to it. It's about every 2.5 kilometers or so. There's another major deposit. And starting in the south, they go Kerr, Sulphurets, Mitchell, Iron Cap, and then what would be Gold Storm 2, which hasn't been drilled yet, and then Gold Storm, and then what would be Gold Storm 3 after that. So we're just working on the Gold Storm right now.
Unbelievable.
And that one there, he says that, we think you have a conceptual volume of about 1 billion tons. And where he gets that from is about kind of a swimming pool shape of 850 meters long, 600 meters wide, and about 700 meters deep at the shallow end. And then as we move north, we get to the deep end of the pool. And last year we went down about 1,200 meters until the drill gave out.
Great analogy, because you can actually picture that in your head.
So this year they're bringing in a couple of big drills that can go kilometers deep, which might seem kind of crazy, but there's something called the Magneto Telluric survey that was run on this, and it's the same type of survey by the same geophysicist that ran it for Seabridge and for Pretium. Pretium's known for their high-grade stuff, but they actually have a lot of large deposits as well. And this technology helped them discover those. It helped KSM discover, probably close to half of their value right now, and that was run on Treaty Creek as well. And this MT survey helped find the Gold Storm, but it's also showing that it should extend way beyond what they're drilling right now. So well under the glacier to the east, and potentially as much as another 1,600 meters to the north. And it's 850 meters right now. So if we just look at what we think they already have before any more drilling accounts for this year, we're looking at about close to 1 billion tons at close to 1 gram. Now, if it was 1 gram, that would be kind of 32 million ounces, and it's not a gram. So we know that it's something less than that. We think the first 300 meters are actually really close to a gram, perhaps just under, perhaps just over, but in that range. And then the next 300 to 400 meters, which is called the 600 zone, that one's somewhere between, say, 1/2 and 3/4 of a gram. But then it also has copper and silver credits as well. The very top part is kind of, they think, is a halo to a large porphyry system that's much deeper. That MT survey is showing that it could go down, 4 kilometers, and then we ran out of chart. But I think you kind of run out of practicality at that point as well. So I'm not saying they're going to drill that deep, but they're going to drill deeper than the 1,200 meters that they did last year.
And last year, because of the size and because the deposit was open, they didn't get to the outer edges. They refrained from putting out, this is Tudor Gold, refrained from putting out a resource estimate. Do you expect a resource estimate this year? And if so, ballpark, when would you expect that to come in from Tudor?
Sure. Even with all the extra money and the extra drilling, which I think that they're going to do, I don't expect them to find the edges of it this year, just based on the geophysics and the geology. I could be wrong on that, but I do expect them to put out a resource calculation. And they've said that they're going to do that after or including the drilling that's taken place this year. So my guess is probably as early as possible next year that they would do that. And I believe they're going for a measured resource calculation. So there's measured, and then there's indicated, and then there's inferred. And this really depends on the spacing between drill holes. And so, and therefore confidence in what's actually there. And so with measured, quite often with large porphyry systems, which this looks like it is going to be, quite often the distance between the holes are 25 to 50 meters apart from each other to get measured, and about double that for indicated, and then much wider for inferred. In this case, measured is 100 meters in between, and indicated is 200 meters. And that's because it's so consistent from top to bottom and from hole to hole.
That's beautiful.
You know, these wide intervals. And so I've never actually seen anything quite like this, where you can actually drill that far apart and still get it into measured. So what it means to, you know, us as shareholders is that they can accomplish far more with far less drilling than the average or any other type of system like this that I've seen. And then when you add to that how many meters I think they're going to drill and how many drills they're going to have on there, it's going to add up to something quite significant. I can't really speculate what it's going to be, but I think it's going to be pretty spectacular. It'll be world class.
Eric is saying tens of millions, so I guess we all kind of lean on that.
That puts it, even right now, that puts it in the kind of top 20 deposits in the world type of thing, whether it's producing or not.
Almost hard to believe as you're saying it, but that's what they're thinking.
It is what they're thinking. And the beautiful part about it as well is the logistics involved in it. So we're on the right side of the mountain is a big issue. So there's potential for CapEx and OpEx to be quite low. So in the world of large deposits around the world, a lot of them are in places like Kazakhstan or China or that type of thing, what Konkin refers to as AK-47 jurisdictions. That gets rid of about half.
You're in British Columbia, so you're an avocado jurisdiction.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then some of them are just, you know, the very remote. And this one is 20 kilometers, literally down a valley, not through a mountain range or anything, but down a valley to the highway. The highway is an hour and a half away from the Stewart shipping port, which is already set up. There's 2 ports there, set up for bulk tonnage shipping. And the power line actually runs right along the highway. And so it's the cheapest power in the world, 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And so a lot of
literally be able to pave some of that highway with gold, literally.
No, it's too soft. The trucks would sink in, but
it doesn't matter. It's going to look great. We won't let anyone actually drive it. They'll be able to afford to build another road. Right, you know, beside it that people can drive on with asphalt all day long.
There's another factor that's really critical, and it has to do with CapEx, potential CapEx and OpEx, and that is that just by sheer blind luck, I guess, is that this deposit happens to be right at surface. So it starts at surface and then it goes down from there. And unlike some of them that dip very steeply down into the ground, and you have to have a rather poor strip ratio to get down to it. This one is, as I already mentioned, very wide, very long, looks like it gets bigger. And then the top 300 meters is the richest stuff there is. Like, you always want to mine your richest stuff first, right, to pay off your CapEx. and get back into the money as quickly as possible.
Yeah, get it while getting's good.
Exactly. And so this just happens to be on the top. So
is this the dream deposit, Kelvin, for all those different factors? Geography, its actual location, low capex, great partner, great investors. Is there anything, is there anything constructive? Are there constructive criticisms about this where you say, George, there is that one problem though, or is this the dream deposit just has every box checked, it seems like?
I haven't found it yet. So when we do, we'll let you know.
Usually when someone says that, you say, yeah, of course. What else you expect Kelvin to say? But the fact of the matter is, Eric Sprott just put another $9.3 million into Tudor Day and maxed out at 19.9% ownership of his beneficial shares. So and it's kind of hard to really argue with that, right? If he's not seeing it, what are we going to find?
You can't. And the goal with this resource calculation, and I should mention as well, they've started the process for working on a PEA, which is a preliminary economic assessment, right? And my goal is they'll probably try and have that out. I wouldn't expect this year, but down the road. And so they've already started metallurgical studies, and they've already started baseline studies for the environment and everything else that you need to do. They have a great working relationship with the Tahltan Nation up there who are actually doing the environmental studies for them as well. So that's a great relationship. And I think for the NI 43-101 resource calculation, that they're trying to design it within an open pit design. And that's where your CapEx is much, much lower. I can't speak to what the cost would be. I can tell you that Imperial Metals has a big monster an hour and a half north of us on the same highway, 37 up there. And they went into production in 2014, and it was about $500 million in CapEx.
It seems like a great highway. Maybe we should all just take a drive on that highway.
Yeah.
And see if there are any for sale signs out there and maybe pick up our own little piece of magic land.
I can't say that we're going to be the same as them, but I think that we would be probably much closer to them than, say, our neighbors, which is a fantastic project just to the south of us, the KSM.
Sure.
Right. And that project looks fantastic. It looks like they can produce gold really close to $0 an ounce when you get all their copper and molybdenum and silver credits in there. But of course, the challenge there is the CapEx, because it's primarily block cave mining, which is actually very efficient to do, but the CapEx is a problem there. And so I believe there are right around $5.2 billion right now. And so
that's a long way off from half.
A big gap there. So we'll have to see how it goes, but it's looking very promising right now.
Last bit here, more reports are starting to come out now. So Streetwise report put out something about American Creek. We're not allowed to talk about reports about merit. Those are just the rules. So we're not allowed to. So if you want, go find Streetwise reports, look for John Newell. He's a sector expert, and see what he's had to say about short, medium, and long term. Very favorable, very well, very, very nice, but we can't talk about price targets or anything because, and rightfully so, the rules say you have to read the whole thing in its entirety with the risks, with the rewards. So that way we're not cherry picking. But what has come out, what we are allowed to talk about, is a report out of Germany with respect to Tudor Gold.
Yes.
Right? And we are allowed to talk about that. And I'm going to bring it up here in a second, but why don't you tell us about, who that is, and what you're thinking, what your initial reaction was when you saw it. I'm going to bring it up here.
Sure, I'd love to. And this goes back to Walter Storm's roots. He is a German. He
here it is right there, just in case
he's
for
had
everybody.
Businesses all over the world. There's a lot of people in Europe who follow him very closely, and they're very, very excited about what he's doing. Just recently, a company called JS Research put out a report on the Treaty Creek project and on what Walter's doing. So it was about Tudor Gold.
And we've got in front of you, you can see it, Kelvin, it's on the screen.
Yes.
So the headline says, Tudor Gold starts powerful drill program with 22.5 to 32.1 million ounces of gold equivalent target. So they're already calling it for 22.5 to 32 million. Let's call it 22 to 32 million ounces of gold equivalent. That's pretty damn good.
Well, it is, but if you read the report, it's actually pretty simple math. It's taking that area that I talked about earlier,
Right.
and they're showing what's interesting about this report is they do a great job of going over what you and I have already gone over in a lot of our interviews with each other, and just highlighting some different things that people new to the story would be interested in. But then they actually go into, what this might actually look like as a deposit. So, if you have 1 billion tons at 1 gram, then you're closer to that 32 gram range. And then they do it at 0.85 grams per ton, and they calculate it at 0.7 grams per ton, and they come up with these various numbers. And that's where you get this range from 22 to 32 million. And again, that's before we start anything this year. And so just as an example, Tudor has said that they want to step out 150 meters to the north this year. And
by the way, sorry, Kelvin, but I want to bring this table here.
Yes, there it is. Yeah.
There it is right there at, 0.7 grams per ton of gold. They're guesstimating 22, 0.85, 27 at 1 gram, 32 million ounces.
It's an exciting range because even the bottom part of it looks really good.
Who wouldn't love that?
Exactly. So they've done that, and then they've gone through it and they've tried to calculate, what fair market value for, in situ resources would be, meaning resources in the ground. And they come up with some numbers that everyone can look up for themselves if they want to. But they show that this has the potential to be worth billions and billions of dollars.
Well, I'll kind of, I'll read off an excerpt here. If a producer is willing to pay $65 for each ounce of gold, the value of the gold treasure, and they're saying 20 million ounces, would be about $2 billion.
Yeah.
That'd be the total value of Treaty Creek. Tudor Gold's 60% stake would be about 1.2 billion, or basically seven right here. I'll highlight it for everyone, or $7.80 per share, and that's on the low end as far as the number of ounce gold. But then they go on to say, however, because what you just said, we're not an AK-47 jurisdiction, but located in politically safe Canada, takeover premium would be realistic, and they're talking about more about $90 per ounce.
Yeah.
And what that would, and that would take Tudor Gold's price at $10.80 per share. So we can't do the math for everybody, but so you're talking about they've got a range here of $7.80 per share. Let's call it 8 to $10.80 per share. 11. Call that between 8 and 11 for Tudor Gold. People at home can start to do the math as to what that means in terms of, I guess, okay, let me ask you this question. Would it be wrong for someone at home to do back of the napkin math after this is over and calculate the market cap of Tudor Gold because they've got 60%? And say, okay, market cap X, that means American Creek would have market cap of Y, which is 20% of that number, or 1/3 of that number?
Yeah. 20% of the entire project, which includes all three companies.
Right. So 1/3.
Right? Not 20% of
Tudor's
Tudor.
value is American Creek should always be at 1/3 the value of Tudor.
Yeah. It's easy math to do.
Yep.
Right. And there are some other factors in there, but that's pretty simple math to do for people to get a sense of what these guys are projecting. I can't say whether they're right or wrong, but they are talking about 20 million ounces, and they're talking about typically when these projections are done, they're usually using somewhere between $1,250 and $1,500 gold when they do that. So what is gold going to look like in a year or two? And probably higher based on what's happening to the dollar, of course.
Hard to imagine it won't.
And then that's assuming 20 million ounces. And I think we've already shown that there's potential for much more than that on this. So it really does have, actually Eric Sprott said it best when he said the closest thing he could think of in terms of a good comparison for people is when he bought Seabridge back at $1. And this is well over a decade ago. And of course, it ended up going to I think it was about
$15
38
today.
American or 42 Canadian or something like that. Anyway,
We
he
were
made
doing the work
some
for
good money
Secret
with
back
it.
then. We had them advertised on CNBC, on Bloomberg in the
Right.
US. Talk about the size of the deposit. So yeah, it did hit $30 back then. It actually did hit $30.
Yeah, so that's the best analogy he can think of, and I think it's a fair one, given we're right beside, we're in the same geological system with the same fault system producing these large deposits, the same specific type of geology, the same bedrock geology, the Kaiba line, which is where you have two different types of rock, sedimentary and volcanic, joining together. He has said that that's where the big deposits come from, and they'd actually identified Treaty Creek as a potential of that back in 2014. So looks like it's coming to fruition.
And for everyone who wants to review this report, just go to the American Creek Hub. You can see it right there.
Yeah.
It's the American Creek Resources Hub on Agoracom. And look for it on June 12th is when it was posted. And there it is. So if you can freeze frame that, and then you can catch that later.
Great.
Kelvin, all of this, and we haven't even got the first drill results in yet. So can you imagine what kind of conversation between when we bring Darren on to talk about the first set of drill results that you're not in control of, we know, but you're hoping will be potentially, maybe just in time for a nice Canada Day surprise, which would be great.
We're just looking for more of the same.
And more of the same is a very, very good thing, because it looks like it's going to be more and more and more and more of that. So,
and I should mention, George, as well, and that is that kind of the other, we have a lot of great projects, and the issue is that Treaty Creek is so massive that it kind of dwarfs everything, no matter how good everything else is.
Good problem to have, but you're right.
Yeah.
It's the Death Star.
But I do have to talk about Dunwell for just a minute with you. So,
sure.
For those not familiar, Dunwell is a past producing, very high grade polymetallic mine. And it had about 7 grams per ton gold, with about another 6 to 7 grams per ton gold equivalent, depending on what metal prices are on any given day. But fantastic mine, and it is only 8 kilometers away from the shipping ports in Stewart. So it literally takes about 16 minutes in a truck to get from the shipping port to the adit of this mine. That's how close it is. So logistically, it's one of the best ones in the Golden Triangle. And so we acquired that a number of years ago. We've been slowly adding pieces to it. And in fact, this year we added to it significantly. And it wasn't just because the land was close to us. Most of the mineralization that's been found on this property is within something called the Portland Canal Fissure Zone. Actually, there's a number of faults that run north and south on there, and the main one is within the Portland Canal Fissure Zone. This zone runs about 6 kilometers long, George, and we've always had the top 3 kilometers of it. This acquisition that we did earlier this year gave us another 2 kilometers of it extending south. And then of that last kilometer, about half of it, we're right beside it. We don't actually own the fault itself, but we're right beside. And all these deposits take place in and around this fault. They're not necessarily right where the fault is. And so that was a very important acquisition for us. And what we did last year is we had our initial drilling there, and we drilled around where the old mine was. And sure enough, we found more high-grade mineralization taking place just as an extension of where the old mine was. And then we did an IP on there. That stands for induced polarization. That's a type of geophysics that looks down on the ground and tells you where the ground's chargeable and where it's resistive and a number of things, and gives you good targets. And what we found was that the IP that we did correlates quite well with the geology that's there. So the mine's right where it should be if you were just using the geophysics to find the mine. And so that correlated quite well. And this fissure zone that I've been talking about correlates with it quite well as well. So they've given us 35 targets for 2020. So that's too many. So we have to take the best ones.
You got your hands full, man. Between American Creek and Dunwell, you got all a couple of geologists can handle over there.
We do, we really do. And so that extra land that we picked up, we probably won't be working on this year because we have so much going on right close to the mine, just south of the mine. In particular, there's a very large target there that coincides with with another historic showing called the George E. And so we will be working on that this year. We'll be extending, where we're at the mine. And I really expect it to be a fantastic year up there as well. We haven't started it yet, but we hope to soon. Now that our dealer is up there, things are moving up there, and we can get up there and get going pretty soon. So look for news on that in the near future, perhaps towards the end of next month, something like that.
All right. Thanks for giving us that little update on Dunwell. But you're right, it is dwarfed by Treaty Creek right now.
Yep.
And makes me think out loud that who knows, you may get to a point where Dunwell goes into its own company at some point, because it may never get its due. I mean, that's just me putting my corporate, investment banking hat on my, and think that might be possible. But nonetheless, thanks for giving us that
Sure.
rundown on it. And like I said, we haven't even got the first half drill results, and look how much there is to talk about. So
nope.
No.
So we'll talk again soon.
We will talk. I get a feeling we'll be talking a lot, because Tudor's drills are running, and they're going to be running all year. They're cashed up. Eric's put money into flow through, which means it has to go into the ground this year. So we know we're going to be back a lot. It's going to be an exciting time. Kelvin, thanks so much for joining us, my friend.
No problem. Good to talk to you.
You've been watching Kelvin Burton, Head of Communications at American Creek Resources. The company trades on the TSX Venture Exchange on the stock symbol AMK. You've heard what he had to say. If you've been listening via podcast, you've watched what he've had to say. We've had some images up at the same time to support a lot of what Kelvin's been talking about. Now's the time for you to do your due diligence. Look, most of us got a lot of time. We're at home or we're around the home. There's only so much Netflix you can do. There's so much binging. There's only so much social media stream you can do. But you've got fantastic information. And guys, I can't stress enough that even if you completely dismiss what Kelvin has to say, even if you completely dismiss what I have to say, the fact of the matter is Eric Sprott just put down another $9.3 million into this project. That's your third-party validation. That's your due diligence. And let's not forget, it's Walter Storm who funded Osisko. So between those two, sometimes I say, who are we to argue? Who are we to even debate? You just kind of follow them in and, maybe make them a little, lose a little, make a mountain, you don't know. But, it's hard to kind of argue against that kind of third-party validation. So do your due diligence, guys. Don't say we didn't tell you so, because we've been banging the table in American Creek for almost a year now. Thanks to everyone. Kelvin, thanks again. Everyone have a great day. See you next time.
Take care.